Hi, I am Anita Kozlowski, a master trainer and coach at Live with Power. I am also an internationally licensed trainer of neurolinguistic programming and an internationally licensed practitioner of design human engineering, which is one of the most interesting systems in the world to help you access your creative potential, your creative genius. In neurolinguistic programming, I've been trained by Richard Bandler, who is the developer and originator of NLP. He became over the years my mentor and also an inspiration to create the system of structural psychology, which revolutionizes the field of human communication and therapy. It is a system which allows us to systematize our entire approach to therapy and coaching, allowing us to deal with some of the most complex issues in the world in a very organized, very systemic, and very structured way, which is an amazing tool for therapists such as yourself working with various types of clients. My work over the years has been endorsed by Richard Bandler, who says that I'm one of few trainers who stay on top of the newest developments in this methodology, in this field, and keep up to date with his developments. I've also developed a lot of systems myself over the years. I've been recognized by Anthony Robbins, who called my NLP training one of the best NLP trainings on the planet, by Christopher Howard, who called me a rock star of NLP based on some amazing results which I've generated with his clients during a Millionaire Mastermind group in Bali. And also T. Harv Eckert, with whom I happened to briefly work in California, in Temecula, during the Mind Over Matter amazing event called the Warrior Training Camp. Some fascinating things happened there. For years and years I've been interested in how the brain works. What really originally fascinated me was what happens to an inherent I am statement, the belief of what I am, in people who do not have the ability to estimate distances. What happens to self among those who cannot estimate any distance? How do they position themselves in the world? How do they define themselves? Most theorists actually said that this statement changes and people's self-concept changes as a result of inability to estimate distances. My inkling was that it wasn't so, because I always believed that there is something within each human being which defies logic and which is our own inherent belief about ourselves, which is independent of what happens in the world. I decided to test this theory and went into a hospital where I studied brain-injured people, some of the most severely brain-injured people, for about 7 months. And I determined and proven through various experiments that indeed these people's sense of self remained unchanged despite the fact that they were not able to determine distance. That completely changed the entire theoretical framework around this concept and changed the entire perception of what personal space is and what I am really means. Several articles were written on the subject, and my advisor on this thesis is still researching this area, as it completely changed the idea in traditional sense of what I am means and how it is represented in the mind of a person. What we've done, we have hooked those people to a galvanic stress skin response, and we're able to determine that despite the fact they couldn't estimate distance, they still responded emotionally the same way as so-called normal people would to their personal space being encroached upon. They had normal reactions within the same range as normal humans. Fascinating study, and it has far-reaching implications in the way that I do therapy now, because having discovered this essential truth about people, I started to ask what is the inherent belief system about myself among people who are my clients, who come with various different problems. And that is an interesting process, because that changes the way that we do therapy 100%. Since that time, I've worked with thousands of people across the world with various debilitating problems. Those are the kind of people that the mainstream society, community, psychotherapy community gives up on. People that have been attending therapy, who have been seen by psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and all kinds of professionals for years and years, to no avail. I've had seen people with phantom limb pain that their pain could not be removed, only to take it out. People with clinical depression for years, with various addictions, learning disabilities, and all kinds of different interesting cases, all of whom I were able to help. I've also worked with people to help them develop much better communication skills, increase their creative expression, improve their memory, which can be drastically changed. In fact, you can learn a language in a few months, which would normally traditionally take some years. I helped people get rid of serious internal blocks which prevented them from expressing full potentials, worked with children with educational disabilities and all those interesting, fashionable new illnesses that came up in the last 10 years. Inside each and every one of us, every human being, there is the very, very best version of ourselves. That version is ready to be always expressed. It exists at a level of cellular memory. And my purpose through my work is to help people bring that out and step into their best version, into their excellence. So let's get back to why you're here. You are someone that got into the work of helping others because you are passionate about what you do, passionate about creating change and also impacting people in a transformational, meaningful way. You absolutely love what you do and want to be very effective in your results, and you want to really make a change in your clients' lives. Your business success also depends on the kind of results that you generate, on permanent change that you are able to achieve. And over the years, you've been probably finding out that you've had some challenges. You probably found yourself, as most people in your field, sitting across a client whom you were actually not really able to help in any meaningful way. You've done everything that you possibly could, asked the right questions, or so you thought, and at the end of the day, that client walked away not really having experienced any meaningful change. The case may have seemed quite complex, quite convoluted, and you were not able quite to pinpoint what exactly went wrong. You did everything you could. You were not able to get the results that you expected. Maybe that client did not get a kind of breakthrough that you expected. That probably left you feeling kind of flat and dissatisfied. Maybe the change did not happen, or you found yourself disappointed and started second-guessing your variability. Sometimes I'm sure you've had a client who became really resistant to your help, and no matter how hard you tried, whatever you did, you felt as if you suddenly hit a concrete wall. They just did not participate anymore. They switched off. Something happened. Or they became even hostile to whatever you were doing. That happens. You obviously missed something really important here. And what you would like to do is to wake up in the morning really excited about your work because you know that you're making a difference. You would like to be able to help any client, no matter how complex a case. You would like to be able to solve even the most difficult cases, which would give you confidence in your work and that sense of satisfaction that comes from really deep knowing that you know what you're doing. Most importantly, I know that you would like to have the magic button, a proven strategy to generate measurable results. If you could be a magician and press a red button and imagine yourself pushing it and having an absolute strategic blueprint of how to work with any client, blueprint for what to look for when presented with any client, and a strategy how to solve even the most complex problem, would give you an amazing sense of confidence. It would be probably one of those magical things that you would want to have. As a result, you would wake up excited about your work and also indirectly grow a referral business, which is always based on word-of-mouth referrals of people who are really happy with what happened in their lives. And this is one of the most satisfying aspects of my business, because at this point in my career, probably 99% of people that I see are coming because they have been referred by someone else who experienced a massive and amazing change. So it's a way to organically grow your business, where advertising becomes unnecessary and your sheer excellence and the results that you generate are the engine that drives your business. And this is the ideal place where all of us want to be. This is when you know that you've arrived and you are living your passion and doing the work that you've wanted to do with the kind of results that you've always wanted. So by the end of this webinar, after I've had this chat with you, you will be able to learn how to define your client's real problem that they are not even aware of or might be telling you about. That you will have an understanding that sometimes what people come to you with is not exactly what you think it was. And once you've known that, you will be able to create permanent and massive change in their lives. You will be able to know how your client creates negative emotional states in their problem. Every person has a strategy to create an emotional state. And once you've known that, you'll be able to change their negative states almost instantly to a more desirable state, almost as if you have touched things with a magic wand. It's quite amazing. You'll be able to understand how to correctly diagnose the problem, including belief systems which are inherent to your client's problems, so that this problem does never ever repeat itself in any shape or form, doesn't show its ugly head in any aspect of that person's life. Because what I've noticed is that if we do not eradicate a problem at a deep foundational level, the problem will appear in other aspects of a person's life. For example, someone that had a problem with overeating will suddenly start compulsively shopping or gambling or being engaged in other behaviors. The reason being that the structure of the problem remained unchanged. It remains as healthy as it's always been. It only changes its format, but nothing really changed unless we've changed it at a very deep level. You will also learn how to speak to your client's internal emotional language. This will create a sense of real trust between you and your clients. They will feel like they can open up to you and share their innermost secrets, their most painful secrets, their most challenging problems, and feel as if they are sharing it with a real long-term friend. You will become their partner in solving their problem. And that is a deep sense of connection that a person who speaks to you is going to feel, which you really need in order to be able to help them. So these are the key things that you absolutely need to master if you want to become a powerful agent of transformational change. Gaining this particular specific skills will absolutely revolutionize your practice and completely transform the way that you deal with your clients. You will become one of the elite few people who really know what they are doing when dealing with clients. The first point that you really need to master is the ability to define the problem that your client comes to you with. Most therapists make a cardinal mistake, and I say it again, cardinal mistake, of taking at face value everything that client tells them. The truth is, 90% of the time, the real issue is not what the client tells you, but something totally different. And this is not because the client is lying, but because they've made the wrong assumptions about their own problem. I've had a client, for example, who believed that he had a phobia of small spaces. He really did. And I asked him what kind of a car was he driving to work, and he says Corolla. That's not a very large car, so I knew right away that it wasn't small spaces that he had a problem with. So I decided to ask him some very specific and very strategic questions to find out what really was the problem. And I quickly found out that this client was crushed by stands in Liverpool during one of the football matches. Number of people fell on top of him and he thought he was going to die. So his real fear was not the fear of small spaces, but the fear of being crushed by people, which had implications in him being able to ride elevators, go into crowded shopping malls, do Christmas shopping, and do all those things that people normally do. But it wasn't small spaces. If I believed him that he had a fear of small spaces and applied a traditional phobia cure, this client would not have had any change. They would not have experienced any difference because that was not the problem. So, knowing what I know, I knew what to ask him in order to really figure out what was really happening. And I applied a completely different intervention strategy to help this person. And he experienced a massive change and became free of these problems. And today he can ride in elevators, he can enter shopping centers, he can go into crowded malls at Christmas time and not be panicking when he enters a party where a lot of people stand next to each other. People experience discomfort and labeled it as a particular problem, like my client. They apply their own criteria to their problem, and it makes absolutely perfect sense to them in their own unique world. We cannot possibly assume that we have the same understanding of what their problem is. So your goal as a therapist is to really understand what the problem means to the client so that you are on the same page. And it is also an absolute prerequisite for you to start making a real difference in people's lives and help people transform their lives. This is the most fundamental thing that you need to be able to do, and this is what we teach in our programs. They are ways to ask questions, to really understand what you truly are dealing with, not what you assume the problem may be. The second thing you need to know is to recognize how your client creates their problem state. Recognizing how they create negative emotional states is the most fundamental skill that you absolutely need to have. I'm astounded, I really am, that clinicians, even this day and age, search for a single root cause of the problem, but they ignore the most fundamental question. How does my client create my emotional state? People have problems because they feel bad, but no one asks, how do they create that feel bad feeling? They obviously must be doing something inside their heads, which they do, to create that bad feeling. Something really specific, unique to them, to create that experience, especially if they do it repeatedly and do it over and over again. Feelings do not happen randomly. Feelings happen strategically, and they happen really, really fast. Someone intelligent, I think it was Richard, who says that your brain works faster than you think. And whatever it is that happens is very specific, and you need to know what it is that happens in order to help people change their emotional states. If you know how your client creates their experience, you can actually help them in a very specific way to change the very strategy of getting into that state. You can even change the building blocks of that experience. Let's for a moment look at my client Billy. He's 29 years old, he lives with his mother, never worked, doesn't have a girlfriend, and he's clinically depressed. When he told me his story, I told him that I would also be, which changed his perception of his problem, as he was surprised that I would say it. But when I asked him to go back to a time just before he had that feeling last time, he specifically told me that he saw darkness, something like a dark vortex, and he also heard a voice inside his mind, a man's voice inside his head saying, "This is the end." So he gave me the very strategy for feeling bad. The voice had particular tonality, as I discovered. It also had direction from which it was coming, and the darkness was really, really dark, and the vortex was really deep. So changing any of these qualities instantly changed Billy's experience. I asked him to reverse that voice and speak backwards. Then I changed the tonality of the voice into that of a child. "This is the end" does not necessarily sound "this is the end," creating the same experience. The darkness, I created laser lights that were blowing lights through the darkness. In the absence of dark, Billy found it hard to feel depressed. So changing any of these building blocks of negative experience can create instant, almost magical results. A person just cannot get to that emotional state. So for you to know the exact strategy that your client uses to design their immediate experience gives you a tremendous power to help them. You can literally transform people's experience in an instant. You can shift perceptions. You can facilitate shift from depression to curiosity, which is a much more effective state than sadness. You can do all these things if you understand the very way that people create their experience, and every human being on this planet creates their experience with a specific strategy that you need to understand in order to help them. The third thing you need to know is be able to correctly diagnose the problem. It seems really simple. People have problems because they became really, really good at having those problems. People became experts at creating problems. They became masters. They became an expert in their problem. In some ways, they became absolute geniuses who mastered the art of having a depression or anxiety. They know how to do it, when to do it, how to maintain it. They know every aspect of it, and they designed it in an absolutely foolproof manner. So being able to To correctly diagnose your client's problem is the most fundamental skill that you absolutely have to have. You must not only know what you're dealing with and how they created it, but you also need to know what are the inherent beliefs that are built into this problem. Those beliefs are the building blocks of the problem. They are the reasons they have created the problem. They also are the strategies which allow them to create the problem. And at the same time, they determine the very fabric of the person's experience. Most people are also not aware of the fact that their fundamental definition of the self, which remains hidden in their other than conscious mind, determines the quality of their lives. It is on that foundation that people selectively pay attention to the world. They seek to validate some inherent truth they accept about themselves, whether they are aware of it or not. This is the foundation upon which they create beliefs about how the world works. They construct problems with which they come to you or me for help. The system of beliefs are very deeply hidden in this person's other than conscious mind, and they are a real treasure trove of information which you need to unravel in order to be able to help them. So unless you unravel the belief systems inherent to your client's problems, you cannot effectively help them because their beliefs are the fabric of their reality. At our trainings, we will teach you some very, very specific and powerful skills to unravel your clients' beliefs with great precision. You will be able to ask some very precise and targeted questions that will allow you to unravel what is really happening in their minds and at a really deep level. Let me give you an example of one client I had. This was a 9-year-old child named Austin who believed he was stupid. He believed he was stupid, which was his inherent I am statement, because he failed in school at various subjects. He qualified his lack of self-worth by some kind of unsuccessful results in his life. So in order to change that perception of himself, I had to help him achieve a degree of success by which he could convince himself that he was not stupid, that in fact he was smart and capable. So I got him to do some simple things. I got him to draw on a flip chart paper an image of what he was really good at, whatever it was, and he said, "Oh, I'm really good at playing computer games," which showed me that his attention deficit disorder was very selective. When he drew what he was good at with great gusto and wonderful colors, I asked him to write on top of the page, "I am a winner," which he finally did after I taught him how to spell very easily. Suddenly he realized that he was able to do something successfully. Therefore, he was not stupid. Therefore, he was just needing to change some learning strategy or maybe change the school in order to enjoy it better and become successful at different subjects where he weren't before. It really worked extremely well. So, this is a fundamental thing you need to do. The fourth thing you need to be able to do is to speak the emotional language of your client. The key to successful communication is being able to speak your client's internal language. Every human being on this planet has their own way of creating meaning and emotional states. And unless you are able to speak their language, their inherent emotional language, you may never really know how to connect with them or generate a feeling that you are on the same page. There are different ways that you can determine what that language is and how to speak directly to that person's emotions. When you are able to do that, you'll be able to develop a deep and lasting rapport where they will speak to you like a long-lost friend. An example of this was a particular client I had who was an accountant, a successful one, who was facing an imminent divorce from his wife. He had no idea why she was unhappy with him because, according to him, he did everything right. He supported the family, bought her the kind of house she wanted, the car she was driving, took her on vacations, and remembered her birthdays. On his list of things, he did everything right, and he indeed deeply cared about her. What I discovered by having conversation with him, that the way he was talking to himself and representing the world around him was very different from the way that his wife looked at things. She was a very visual person. She cared about the language, describing how things look, how they appear, how beautiful she was. Very focused on aesthetic appeal of the house and how he presented himself. In his own mind, he spoke to him in an internal dialogue using language which was very auditory, which was completely foreign to his wife's internal representation of the emotional world. And it is as if they spoke two different languages without sharing a common understanding. I got him to do some very simple exercises where he learned how to speak his wife's emotional language, and suddenly the sparks flew and the romance was reignited into their relationship. It was quite profound. So let me recoup for a minute. What are some of the fundamental skills that you need to master to be able to call yourself the master of transformational change? First, you really need to be able to define the problem and name it for what it is rather than what you think it is. You have to be very precise defining the problem and understand what you are really dealing with. Second, you must be able to recognize how your client creates their negative emotional state. You must be aware of the building blocks of their emotions, understand how they created it so that you can change it and help them change it. You must also be able to correctly diagnose the problem and understand the system of beliefs that your client has to support the problem. And fourth, you have to speak the same language that they speak emotionally. And unless you are able to do these things, you cannot really help your client in any effective way. And that is the truth. The truth is also that you can easily learn those things because they are learnable and apply them with extremely powerful systems that we have for you. So what will happen when you have learned these things? Well, becoming a transformational coach is within your reach. Once you've learned how to look at problems correctly, you will have become a magician that is able to create magic almost instantly. Your ability to ask questions will totally revolutionize the way that you communicate. Strategic questions will lead your clients to emotional breakthroughs right in front of your eyes. You will become a master of influence. You will be able to shift people's perceptions of their own problems. You will not only enjoy your work much more, which will leave the guesswork removed from your work, but you will also build a powerful referral business created by word-of-mouth referrals of your extremely happy clients. You will become an expert able to help any client, even the one with the most challenging and difficult problem. You will be able to help anyone. Imagine a sense of confidence and satisfaction that this will give you. So what I shared today, if implemented properly in your business, you will become an absolute master of transformational change. I have a very special and unique opportunity for select few today. So if you are in the business of helping other people and want to be able to become an absolute expert in your field and solve your clients' problems easily and effortlessly and permanently, I'm inviting you to apply for a free strategic breakthrough coaching call so that I can personally help you understand the blind spots in your coaching process. We will identify what you will need to do to become a recognized expert your clients will talk about over and over again. And I can't wait to speak to you live and help you start transform your business. I've been there, I've done that. The world needs people like yourself, transformational agents like you. So thank you for spending this time with me, and I really hope to connect with you again. For more information on our programs, remember to visit www.livewithpower.com.